What's up, psychedelic investors? My name's James, and I'd like to welcome you to our community. Today we're going to be talking about MindMed's LSD Neutralizer, easily one of the most underrated technologies the company is developing. But first, if you enjoy this content and find it useful, invest in the channel with your like and subscribe. You'll see a return on your investment in the form of quality content in the psychedelic medicines field that you won't get anywhere else. Your support will help keep this channel alive so that the videos keep coming. Enjoy the video. So in this video, we're going to do three things. First, we're going to look at what this LSD Neutralizer is. Next, we're going to talk about why it's important. And finally, we're going to end with a note of caution. So starting at the beginning, on April 21st, 2020, MindMed released a press release saying that they have developed an LSD Neutralizer technology to shorten and stop trips. They did this in collaboration with the University Hospital Basel's Matthias Liecki laboratory in Switzerland. And as a side note, MindMed is collaborating with this university and Dr. Liecki, apologies if I'm saying your name wrong, on many projects, ever since MindMed acquired the exclusive rights to 8 clinical trials of LSD at the beginning of April. And these include the project to treat anxiety with LSD, codenamed Project Lucy. And just to let the psychedelic investor community know, we will definitely be having an episode on the MindMed University Hospital Basel collaboration in the future. So back to the topic at hand, the LSD Neutralizer. According to the press release, MindMed has filed a patent for this technology which they say will help shorten and stop the effects of an LSD trip. They elaborate and go as far as to say that the technology may act like an off switch to an LSD trip. So this is obviously very cool technology, and I met a couple people in university who could have used it. But what does it mean for the MindMed investor? So there are 3 main benefits to an LSD Neutralizer. First, it makes LSD-assisted therapy more accessible and practical. For those that don't know, an LSD trip typically lasts between 6 and 15 hours depending on the dosage and the person taking it. Now, unless you were planning on having a day-long therapy session, giving a person a half-day lasting hallucinogen poses some issues. First, what does the patient do when the session is over? Do they stay at the clinic until the effects wear off, or do they go their own way afterwards? And this would pose the issue of what happens if a trip goes bad after the patient leaves the clinic. Taking it to the extreme, what would happen if the patient hurt themselves after leaving the clinic while under the influence? Would the clinic or the therapist be held liable for giving them the substance? And the idea of making the therapy day-long to combat this has its own issues. Primarily, if you had to book a therapist for a full day, the price would be massive, and it would price out a huge number of people who could only afford maybe a 1 to 2 hour session. So the existence of an LSD neutralizing technology negates these concerns, and thus enables LSD-assisted therapy. If the therapist has within her or his power to flip a switch and turn off the LSD trip, it will enable shorter sessions. This in turn will make LSD therapy as a concept, whether to treat anxiety, depression, or any other malady, much more accessible and practical. The second benefit of LSD neutralizing technology is the ability to stop a bad trip. Though supposedly rare, bad trips are a very real phenomenon. Even if the percentage is small, some number of people will freak out when LSD starts interacting with their system, and it just takes one bad apple to ruin the whole bunch. So even if 1 in 500 people become violent in this situation, some would argue that that would be enough to scrap the whole idea of LSD-assisted therapy. The existence of an effective neutralizer would allow a therapist to end prematurely a trip if they felt it was turning bad. Again, this makes the whole idea of LSD-assisted therapy more viable. And finally, the third benefit of having an LSD neutralizer is psychological, and related to the second. Many people, particularly those who have never done a psychedelic before, may be very worried about having a bad trip. And unfortunately, worrying about a bad trip just makes it more likely. But if the patient knows that in the event of a bad trip, the therapist can just stop the hallucination, he or she will be much less worried about the possibility, thus making the probability of it happening in the first place much lower. So just to summarize, an LSD neutralizer isn't just a useful tool for LSD therapy, but rather it enables LSD therapy in the first place, in my opinion. And speaking of which, now it's time to enter the speculation zone. Remember that what I say in the speculation zone is just that, speculations. I'm looking at the facts that I have presented you, and I'm going to give you my opinion and scheme some ideas. It might be wrong, and if you believe so, please let me know in the comments. If you have an article to prove me wrong, even better. We will all be better positioned if that is the case. So, what does it mean for the company and investors that MindMed has this technology? Well, here's my thought process. First, I mentioned last week that I was more excited about 18MC than MindMed's LSD projects because if they are successful, rivals can just copy MindMed since LSD is basically in the public domain. 18MC, on the other hand, is proprietary. If MindMed is successful in treating addiction with it, only they will have the right to make and sell the drug. But, as I also mentioned, LSD therapy carries with it several risks, mostly stemming from the 6 to 15-hour time horizon and the possibility for bad trips. If MindMed has a successful LSD neutralizer that is proprietary, particularly if no other company has their own, and if LSD therapy more or less requires an LSD neutralizer, then maybe they will be the only company positioned to hold practical LSD-assisted therapy. So this gets me scheming, like, could MindMed hold a de facto monopoly on LSD-assisted therapy? But then my thoughts are running in a different direction. Maybe MindMed could just sell the neutralizer to other companies or public health services eventually that want to run LSD therapy. This could allow MindMed to be more of a pharmaceutical company. And if you think about it holistically, it could be argued that if LSD therapy is a true boon for mental health and thus our society would benefit greatly if the treatment became widespread, and even if MindMed had the perfect scaling plan, it would take perhaps decades to scale to the level needed to satisfy the demand. They wouldn't just be able to will an organization across continents into being, train the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of professionals needed, and deploy them. It would make more sense, once validating the science behind LSD therapy, to allow other companies to give LSD therapy through selling them the neutralizer that makes it a realistic option. This way we can scale a solution to mental health maladies much quicker, while of course MindMed produces and sells the medicine, the antidote that makes it possible. I guess what I'm trying to say is, what if, and again, this is just speculation, what if the product is the LSD neutralizer, not the LSD therapy? Plus, though LSD is relatively easy for scientists to make, if companies and therapists are already ordering their neutralizers from MindMed, wouldn't it make more sense to save on the shipping and order both at the same time, especially if they were engineered to work well together? So it is possible that maybe MindMed will pioneer the therapy, prove its efficacy, and then encourage other companies to use the techniques that they created for either free or low cost, and then sell them the medications that make it possible. But again, guys, this is all just wild hypotheses, and now I'm going to throw some cold water on a bit, with the section that I like to call the come down. This is where I point out some of the reasons why I could be totally off base and bring down the hype a little bit. So first of all, for the LSD neutralizer to be worth anything, first the validity of LSD therapy must be proven without a doubt, and we aren't there yet. As I've stated before, the trials are all in phase 2A, which means there is still time to be disappointed by trial results. Look, I believe they will be successful, but I don't know. And if the therapy fails, the LSD neutralizer won't be worth much. I'm just trying to keep it real with you guys. The second issue is there isn't much information out there on the LSD neutralizer, other than the press release announcing its patent and a few mentions throughout the website and in investors' documents. Information on what the neutralizer is and how effective it is proved difficult for me to find. However, Reddit helped me find this document of an LSD experiment run by the Liechti lab, where part of what they found was ketanserin almost completely prevented the response to high 200 microgram dose of LSD, thus confirming the critical role of 5-HT2A receptors in mediating psychedelic effects of LSD. So I think that this might be the LSD neutralizer. And if it is, it does look promising based on this study. But I do want to re-emphasize that everything I schemed on could be off because of my lack of complete knowledge. I don't know more than I know. Maybe I'm missing important documents, and if I am, please post them in the comments. Another big question mark that would be the death knell for my theory is that I don't know how difficult it would be for other companies to make their own unique proprietary LSD neutralizers that works in a slightly different way. If this is the case, say goodbye to my theory. So those are my thoughts on the LSD neutralizer that MindMed says they have and what it would mean. If you found this video entertaining or educational, smash that like button, destroy the subscribe button, and ring-a-ding-ding that bell for notifications. It will help with the YouTube algorithm and ensure that both you and others keep seeing this content. That's all for today, folks. This is James from the Psychedelic Investor, signing out. I'll see you next time.